Good morning, everyone. My name is Craig White. I'm one of the co-hosts for the Radical Housing Conference Scotland, Part 1. I'm going to hand over to Rachel Lawrence, who will chair this morning's session. So, Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, and a very warm welcome to everybody here this morning. So, my name's Rachel Lawrence. Obviously, I'm the Grown in Britain business manager. We're a not-for-profit organisation that certifies forestry and chain of custody for timber. We'll move on now to our second speaker. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Guy Phillips, co-founder and CEO of Highland Heritage Woodworks, a new mill in Aberdeenshire, with innovation at its heart. Guy is new to sawmilling. He spent 25 years as a geologist working for BP, set up Highland Heritage with a good friend of his who is also conveniently a master cabinet maker. So there's a really nice skill set there. I'd say unencumbered by traditional mindsets in sawmilling, Guy's gathered a team with exceptional talents and a really fresh approach. He's a firm believer in making the best use out of natural resources on your doorstep. And I'll hand over to you now, Guy.
Thanks, Rachel, for the glowing introduction. Very much appreciated. A quick bit of logistics to make sure I can present my screen here. Well, I was listening intently there to Christiane's talk, thinking, has she got hold of my PowerPoint somehow? Because there were so many touch points in there, and it was fascinating. Yeah, so my name's Guy Phillips. I'm talking for a very windy Aberdeenshire, although not as windy as the rest of the country. We are a pretty youthful startup company, about 4 years old, but building on a deep tradition. That's my business partner on the far right. That's Armand. He's Latvian, and in fact, the rest of the team are Latvian. I'm the odd one out. I'm the Welsh geologist amongst a bunch of Latvians, although we have diversified quite a lot recently. This is just a small little PowerPoint presentation that shows who we are, where we've come from, where we're going, and our kind of part to play, I think, in some of the themes that are being shared here. So with further ado, I think I should press on. I just wanted to kind of capture at the very beginning, what's our purpose? Because everyone needs a purpose. Purposeness kind of drives passion. And I think for us, you know, we're a small, vertically integrated, I'll come back to that, innovative company. And I think our purpose is to drive value, in our case, into Scottish timber, but you could equally apply that to homegrown timber. I think there's a real huge amount of value to be driven there. I think we've an opportunity and a real desire to deliver and show better outcomes for this fantastic material that kind of grows around us. From Christiane's statistics, there was a significant amount of timber that's being harvested from Scottish forests. And I think our role is to show how that can be harvested, consumed, utilized in innovative ways. So I think that's part of what our purpose is about. I really believe that we want to grow our business and we want to provide really high quality, rural-based, skill-based rural jobs. And that's just not rural jobs for rural people. I want us to encourage people out from the cities and come and explore what it is to work in a rural environment. I think there's a lot of focus about, oh, we need a rural economy to support the, rural population. But actually, if we can do some of that switching around, I think there's a lot more education that can come through that process. And I think as well as a small sort of startup company, we've got a huge role to play in that sustainable future. And I could look back at my former employer, BP, don't judge me. It's very easy to point the finger at a big company and say, you guys sorted out, you're on the hook for, sorting out net zero. But actually, I think the lion's share of the net zero activity is very easily and far easier delivered by small to medium enterprises. So I think that's part of our purpose as well. And we're very focused on that journey. Talking about that journey, this is sort of where we've come from. Armand's and I started this company 4 years ago. It built on Armand's existing master carpentry sort of skills and workshops. So we did have a bit of a head start. I had my career and my business development skills, and I had a small team and a really fantastic reputation. Generally in Latvia and in other kind of parts of Eastern Europe. craft-based skills are still highly valued. And of course they are here, but they used to be a lot more than they are now. A significant amount of the population we're embedded in craft-based activity, and that's lessened. And it'd be great to see more of that stuff coming back. Like I said, we started 4 years ago. I very quickly came in and why on earth are we buying all of this imported timber? One, it costs an absolute fortune. Two, it can't be good for the planet. It can't be. I know there's debate about, containerization and all that sort of stuff, and it's not simple. I recognize that. But in principle, surely we must be able to utilize materials from our own sort of backyard. And in response to that, we invested some money. We bought a Wood-Mizer sawmill. I nearly took my finger off on the first day. Don't regret that. Well, I do regret that, actually. And we also invested in a small timber drying kiln. It's a vacuum drying kiln. So we bought a new piece of kit and some secondhand kit. And actually what we did in those very early months and the first sort of year or so was to prove our business model. The business model being that you could source materials locally and people would consume that. And that vertical integration started really quickly. And I'll come on to why that's really important for us. There's a couple of images there of what that kind of traditional work that's still a good proportion of what we do is highly skill-based, high-end bespoke kind of projects effectively. Projects are fantastic, but also there's a cash flow piece associated with projects which is less easier to manage. And where have we got to? I mean, in pretty short order, we've significantly grown our business. We've grown our aspirations. We are highly innovative. You guys can decide whether we're highly innovative or not. What we have been able to do is attract a serious amount of help and support. In particular, and I don't know if it's special to Scotland, but there's a huge entrepreneurial support ecosystem here. We've had grant support from Scottish Enterprise because they really believed in what we were doing. We've had help and grant support from Scottish Forestry, Opportunity Northeast, that's an Aberdeenshire-based organisation looking to diversify away from hydrocarbons. We've had some help from the Forestry Commission through their Woods into Forestry Management Fund. And there's a real desire to see small companies kind of put their heads above the parapet and help provide those rural-based jobs. That's what a lot of those organizations are interested in. And as a result of that, we've invested a significant amount of money into our new sawmill facility. We're based on the Dunecht estate, which is a big estate here in the northeast of Scotland, about 60,000 acres, and we're a tenant of the landlord here. And we've repurposed an old grain drying site and set up our sawmill in there. It's a significant investment for us. It's been a real strain, if you like. We've tried not to take on much debt, and we've avoided that, which is great. But that has meant that a lot more of those bespoke projects have had to come through the workshop in order to help and afford that. But now we're in a position where we've got a significant capacity upgrade, if you like, to our sawmilling capability. So that allows us to produce significant volumes. In this case, we're looking at some larch cladding, for example, or some Douglas fir beams. But of course, everyone knows that wet timber is one thing, kiln-dried timber is something very, very different. And it's that kind of value addition that we're really looking to do every time we kind of put our hands on a piece of timber. So we've invested in for us, a very large 60 cubic meter timber drying kiln. It's from an Italian manufacturer. It's the first one in Scotland. I'm really proud to have that. And we're just commissioning it right now with a big biomass plant system so that we utilize every scrap piece of waste wood. I think that's one of the things that would be interesting to discuss amongst this group is really how green is that consumption of timber. If I think about how a log coming out of the forest ends up being in a post or a beam, there's an awful lot of waste, potential waste along that. And I think we've a real responsibility to try and extract every piece of value out of that piece of timber. So we've doubled in size. We've got a far greater diverse workforce now. We've got a financial officer, does a fabulous job. We've got a new Iranian carpenter that's just joined us. We've got a timber specialist that goes and purchases timber for us. So I think for us, our growth and our success is around having that diverse group of the right people in the right roles, all collaborating together and sharing that journey. So that's where we've got to. I'll share a a little bit about, why aren't we just a run-of-the-mill sawmill, excuse the pun. I think part of it is that we are vertically integrated. So we will, and I'll share Caroline's story in a minute, we'll engage with a customer right at the very beginning and sort of bring them through on that journey of forest to front door, a bit of a tagline for us. We're not constrained by history. I have no idea what sawmilling is about. I have a bit more of an idea now, thankfully, but at the very beginning, not a clue, other than a real keen interest in timber. A lot of the people on this call will be so delighted to go into a woodland, to smell the air, to hear the birds, to hear the wind whistling in the trees, will camp out at a moment's notice in that forest. I think we'll probably share a very similar passion around that. But actually that, and turning that into a business and around sawmilling, is a very, very different proposition. But I think that naivety is a good thing. We really focus on super short supply chains. Genuinely, the material that we bring in, I recognize we're in a fantastic part of the world for timber. The northeast Scotland is exceptional. It's colder, poor quality soils, which means slower grown timber, and we've got exceptional access to species here. But that super short supply chain is about how we can protect the price for the end customer, because price is very, very, key. Timber is a commodity, if you like, but actually we're able to compete somewhat with the bigger mills by having those super short supply chains. Nothing incenses me more than someone sat behind a desk adding 10% for pushing a button on a spreadsheet or sending it away. So super short supply chains. We're innovating all the time, and we have to. If we don't innovate, we are going to end up just trying to compete with a big sawmill making fence posts, and that's not what we're about. So being innovative, that deep customer engagement. So the forest to front door story, showing that journey from the customer, and I'll share that with Caroline in a sec. We've talked about access to great timber and about being, you have to be certified. You have to be thinking about accreditation. That's a really important piece, because you don't get to sit at the table of that timber frame manufacturer unless you're Grown in Britain certified, PEFC, FSC, got your booklet around blue lamb structures or CLT panel manufacturer. So you have to be certified. You have to invest in that. And talking about investment, being able to structurally grade materials, that's something that we've tried to differentiate ourselves about. So that's, I think, perhaps a little bit different. A good chunk of it is around vertical integration. As master carpenters, we want to hand on a piece of material to an end consumer, comfortable consuming ourselves, and we do that. I'll share, I've called this Caroline's story, but it's a little vignette about what it is that makes Highland Heritage Woodworks different, and how I think other small sawmills can differentiate themselves. And in this case, it started with an architectural visit. So we've got an image there of me sort of boring some architects about our new sawmill and our capability, but actually that sparked the interest in an architect who had a customer that wanted a renovation of a little small Scottish bothy. And what we did in that bottom left-hand corner is we took Caroline to the forest. We worked with Jim Riley, a fantastic guy who runs Fask Forestry up here in the northeast. Jim's a real wealth of experience. He's quite proactive on LinkedIn if you ever see him. But he's got a huge amount of passion and care and investment that he's put into forestry, and was able to educate and share that with Caroline. And we went into the forest. We try and specify CC forestry, continuous cover forestry, so individual trees. And genuinely, we could say to Caroline, these are the Douglas fir trees that we're actually taking out. Some Scots pine actually there that's being felled in the bottom left. But, that material is being sensitively harvested and extracted from the forest with a small forest skidder. There's a place for clear fell, of course there is. But, I get quite conflicted when I see my local hillside is gone because it's been clear felled. I think there's also a place for the smaller scale harvesting, and that valuation, we're prepared to pay the best quality, the best prices for those logs. That dissemination of that value is not about us thinking, well, fantastic extra profit to be garnered. It's about paying the guys that are taking it out. That stuff is hand chainsawed. It's about paying the landowner more for the logs. It's about that distribution of that value, if you like, up and down the chain, if you like. And as a result of that, yesterday we were out there before the storm came, processing these lovely larch and Douglas fir beams ready for the housing project that'll go up later in the spring, which we'll do ourselves. So forester front door in a wrapper, that's exactly what we're kind of about. Question is, this is the Radical Housing Conference, how can we make a difference? And I think I just wanted to share a little bit about, some of the challenges, but some of the opportunities as well. We're a small outfit. We're always going to be a small outfit. No aspirations for being a new James Jones or one of the German outfits or a local big sawmill. But we think there's a significant place for small-scale sawmillers. We've got the enthusiasm, we've got the skill, and I think we can create, in this case, a better outcome for Scottish timber. And Caroline Christiane, apologies, was talking very much so about that. I think it's through collaboration as well with like-minded SME businesses. I've been invited to talk here by Craig. Craig and I collaborate with Agile Property. We supply materials and timber. We have that customer connection all the way back to where that raw material comes from. We are innovative. We're working with other customers around, straw-filled SIPS panels. That's one of Craig's products, for example. Those value additions can be had through innovation. I think, absolutely, Scottish and indeed homegrown timber's got a great brand that's out there. It's bespoke, it's artisan, it's a point of view. But, I think, and probably a lot of people will recognize and come up against homegrown timber, it's poor quality. It's certainly... compared to some countries, it's less kind of curated, if you like, as a material. And I think maybe some of that change needs to come. When we're trying to produce beautiful Douglas fir flooring, there's no way that we can compete with the stuff that comes out of the Black Forest. And the reason that we can't is that they prune that, all the way up to 15 meters with dedicated pruning machines, which means that, you don't get the big section dead knots in particular are a problem, because of the way that other countries look after their timber. I think maybe there's a historical thing, and maybe it's down to the fact that we had things like coal and stuff from the very beginning, is that we didn't have an over-reliance on timber. Scandinavia didn't really have access to hydrocarbons until much later on, so it's had to really focus on its timber industry, and I think that's probably why they're a lot further ahead in that. And so, of course, UK timber struggles against very, very, very efficient, enormous mills in Europe. But I think there's a difference there around how we can play to that strength around net zero. One bugbear for me is that house builders, and it was mentioned around C16, C24, but there's also another piece around treated timber. Everything needs to be bloody treated. It drives me insane. I cannot see for one reason why there needs to be treated timber in the internal wall of a timber frame house. I think in my mind, it's tradition, it's laziness. And I think there's a real challenge out to architects and engineers to question why are we putting timber treatments on certain elements? Of course, sole plates and other bits of the building, yes, absolutely. But I think there's a question there for other partners in this ecosystem to ask those questions. There's a growing interest from government around increased use around homegrown timber. 80% of Scottish new build houses are timber framed. We've got a great history up here. England and Wales at 7%. And ironically, 1% increase in the England and Wales house building would knock the 80% of Scottish timber numbers out of the park. There's such a disparity. Whilst we build a lot of new homes out of timber, even a modest increase in England and Wales will be far more homes built out of timber. So I think there's a real opportunity there. I believe that the use of locally sourced materials does significantly reduce carbon emissions, but I recognize it is complicated. Is it really true that, an individual tree taken out with a chainsaw in a forest, it's got a lovely narrative, it does actually start a perspective against a big scale harvesting operation in Scandinavia, and it comes across in a container ship? I think there's some more work that probably needs to be done. And for us, where next? As a small scale company, I've talked a lot about innovation, and we are innovative. Whilst we're a sawmiller, we're a master carpenter. We've talked about vertical integration. We do make glulam beams. We do timber scantlings. We do cross-laminated timber, because that's where we can add additional value. Very difficult for us to kind of compete by providing a C16 lump of timber against a big sawmill. It's nigh on impossible. And when you add in treatment and other kind of mass scaling structural timber grading capability that these big mills have, it's a really difficult space to compete against. And of course, we need to be a business. I need to pay my guys' wages at the end of every month. And I can't afford to just be innovative. We need to have profitable activity that allows us to grow and invest in those sense of purpose descriptions that I gave at the very beginning. So we are going into this space. We are doing the glulam, as I said. We're providing high quality timber into innovative panel type products. We have a burgeoning cabin business. So there's lots of things that we can do. And I think that strength around vertical integration is sort of helping us in that space. What could we do to help others, and how could other companies sort of look to that? There's significant investment in equipment. You know, one of the reasons that Scottish Enterprise are investing in us is that we're investing in new kit. You know, the UK as a whole has got a real tendency to just buy secondhand gear from other folk, run it till it's absolutely on its last legs, and then think about investing again. And of course, that's a difficult thing to do. Do you invest now on the hope that we can, you know, start producing timber scantlings, or invest in glulam? That's a bit of a leap of faith that leadership, you know, company owners need to make. But I think if there's more demand, if there's more drive from the customer side of things, whether it's through architects specifying, hey, can you do glulam structures? Can you do CLT products? Then I think it gives the incentive to say, yes, let's get after that. We can talk to our funders, we can talk to our investors and say there's a real demand for this stuff. And I think that pull will kind of help with the investment side of things. I think that small to medium enterprises, and I mentioned it before, have got a real opportunity to leverage our smaller size to achieve net zero sooner. We can lead the way, absolutely. We don't have to rely on the big outfits to kind of try and turn these enormous container ships, if you like, these oil tankers, to go back to my former employer. That's a massive, massive thing for those enormous companies to do. Smaller companies, nice and nimble, nice and agile, you know, swap its little forklift over to battery powered, you know, you're halfway through your net zero kind of reduction process. And I think there's a real responsibility around educating people about where our materials come from. Yes, Caroline's a wealthy customer. Yes, she has the disposable income to go and, you know, invest in a project with us. But actually, we need customers like that to help kind of share that story, our narrative, that journey with others, so that people can become better connected. You know, architects can see that this forest to front door is a real opportunity and a real option. That's where I want to get to. I don't think I've got any slides. Yeah, we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy. Really interesting to hear. We do have some questions in the chat. So I've got a question from Mike Wilson. What does Scotland need to do in terms of its timber growing and processing to deliver the number of timber homes needed to answer the nationwide housing emergency? Quite a big policy type question there. Are you happy to take that one?
I have no clue. I'm a geologist, dude.
I'll put that to the
I'm going to let
panel
someone
at the
far
end
more
then.
educated to kind of answer something like that. Craig might have an idea. I'll put him on the spot.
Okay, I'll save that one for the panel at the end, Mike, if that's okay. What I wanted to, you talked about collaboration and personal responsibility in your talk, which is something that I strongly believe in. How, a new startup, how did you start the ball rolling to get those collaborative connections to enable your business to thrive?
I think it's almost out of a need. Let's take, for example, the collaboration that we have now with our timber purchasing staff member. You know, I was doing all of that myself. As a small startup, anyone would recognize this. You do everything. You clean. I've just been cleaning the toilet, actually. I've got to do the accounts later on. You know, you have to do everything. And at some point, you need to recognize that you can't do everything. Otherwise, the bit that you're in position for, which is the lead, the strategic, the direction, the business development, all falls away because you're just running on trying to do everything. So you have to reach out. You have to make the connection. You have to find the right people that are going to go and, in this case, source the right materials. And bringing that team together, my role as a leader is to make myself redundant. Once I've done that, I know I've successfully handed the baton on to the next people that are going to kind of sort of lead that stuff. So distribution of responsibility, I think, and making sure that the team is there to kind of pick up all of those pieces. So that's around, timber procurement, for example. But I think you've got to be pretty bold. We have to pitch up to the local timber frame manufacturer, like Christiane was talking, and say, we want to be the supplier of homegrown timber to you. It's a great narrative. It works really well. Of course, there are issues around material quality. Absolutely. And then it becomes a bigger picture around, well, they're all specifying C24. Well, why are they specifying C24? Well, because the architect said so. Why is the architect doing it? Well, it's because probably it's down to some insurance thing. You can't get a mortgage unless you've got this bit of paperwork. And then suddenly, as you start to lift the hood a bit, let's go milling timber, you think, oh my God, this is really quite deep and embedded all the way back. And I think that's sort of part of that issue. I've probably wandered off a little bit from the question, but I'll pause there. So I think team engagement, people do business with people, be a nice person, do the right thing.
I've got a question here. What role does R&D take in your business as a startup?
A lot. We do a lot of R&D. Some of it's Heath Robinson R&D, as you might expect, but it's also, I'm going to use Craig's company name here, it's also agile, right? That's one of the real benefits of a small organization is, and, as an owner, as a leader, that sounds like a good idea, let's go and do it. I don't need to make a presentation up to a board that says, how about this bit of R&D? So, for example, as you know, Rachel, we've been working together through Grown in Britain and with Agile around some of the, I always get this wrong, WINFIT, isn't it? Woods Intermanagement Forestry Innovation Fund, where, an organization like the Forestry Commission is looking to see how can we get better outcomes for homegrown materials. And we hope to kind of share some stuff in this space, but it's, it's really innovative. It's stuff that's happening in Europe. It's thinking about, utilizing perhaps poorer quality material, if you like, into a higher end product. And I think that's where we have an opportunity to kind of lean into that space because, we've got a little bit of bandwidth in the company. We can lean into that. We can try some stuff. It can be quick. We can fail fast. We can move on. That's what being a small outfit is about. You have to be nimble. You have to be agile. That's the way that a small company will survive. So, yeah, it's a good chunk of what we do. Also need to recognize you've got to keep the wheels in motion because you've got to pay those bills at the end of the month.
Yeah. I've got a question that I'm going to put to the panel at the end, but I'm going to put it to you personally as a sawmiller now, which is around the resources that you've got on your doorstep. And Sitka spruce in Wales, as in Scotland, forms a massive percentage of the species that are grown for use in construction, amongst other things. And we all know that kind of Ips is already down in the southeast of England, attacking spruce. And I just wondered, in terms of the species palette that people need to be starting to think about, where do you see that resilience starting in Scotland, or has it not started yet, in terms of bringing a more resilient species mix into the woodlands to then be used in construction?
I think the bit that I can talk about is, what sort of species do we use? I think since we've been milling, we've actually only taken in one load of spruce. It's not a species that we particularly get involved with. The way we try and differentiate ourselves is actually taking oversized timber. I mean, ironically, it's some of the best stuff. All of those branches are way up top and it's just put on width and girth as it's been growing. And, you get exceptional quality timber from those outer boards. Yes, when you get into the center, it's a lot knottier and the like. So overgrown timber, which the smaller sawmills can cater for. Those big sawmilling lines, they'll have a top diameter through their mill at 300 mil or something. The big stuff is undervalued. And ironically, in our minds, that's really, really the best stuff. So there's one about resilience in terms of being able to take on the larger diameter material, which would just be biomass or wood chipped and sent to Drax or sent across to Holland or wherever it is, Denmark. I think a load of materials gone out of Aberdeenshire. I think also there's a responsibility for us to kind of educate as carpenters who know about timber. When the architect says, "Oh well, I need species X," well, how about species Y? Look at the qualities of species Y. So I think there's an opportunity for greater education, and we'll do our tiny part. There's much better skilled people on this call and in this space that can share where different timber species have different use cases. As a proportion of material grown in Scotland, I don't know exactly what it is, but it'll be 80% or something like that, maybe even higher, Sitka spruce, and everything else is in that tiny piece. Things like Douglas fir, we use a lot of. Larch, which actually is in really quite short supply already. I don't know what that's like in the other parts of the country. And a great example of larch is that why using larch as an exterior cladding board? Douglas fir's got pretty much the same durability characteristics. So I think it's about demonstrating and showing examples of where other materials have been utilized. So I think that's kind of will be an answer. There'll be a better response from the panel after.
Yeah, no, well, it's down to that personal responsibility again, isn't it? You talked about needing to educate people. You have that timber expertise, and you're flowing that knowledge upwards in the supply chain. Can your economics stack up when supplying timber for affordable homes?
It can when you add value to it. If you can, let's say, for example, a panelized product that takes the place of, let's talk about a breathable panelized product. I'm just making it up that, if you can create something out of material that displaces 2 or 3 layers to a build system, or you've got a mechanism by which you can span additional distances utilizing a cool bit of R&D, that then you get to start to compete against a solid piece of C16 or C24 that's come from Sweden or Scandinavia. So I think it's that innovation is part of it. I think being able to do bespoke sawmilling, we do a lot of that. Can you supply X linear meters in 2.7s? Well, of course we can. I'll call up my sawmill log guy and say, we need 2.8s, please, when they're cutting it in the forest. What would traditionally happen is you get a 4.9 meter log, and then what the hell are you going to do with whatever the maths of that is, the 2.1 piece that no one doesn't want? So I think being able to do short production runs for us, it makes kind of economic sense. The numbers start to stack up when people are absolutely minimized. I'm really passionate about that wastage piece. I can't stand the idea of even half meter going off because the customer wanted a 3.7 and we only sold them a 4.8. We don't do that. We'll go and specify a 3.8 from the forest. And I think when you've got that connection back the way with those short supply chains, you're prepared to pay a bit more. The harvester, the forester will go and cut that material and absolutely minimize that waste from the moment that tree's being sized up.
I'm interested to know, just digging into the education piece a little bit, I'm interested to know how somebody with a geologist background learnt as much as you've obviously learnt about forestry in quite a short space of time, and any tips for people in that learning process.
You have to like to talk to people. You have to be curious, right? You can't be passionate. If you're not passionate, I think you're going to really struggle. So passion, curiosity, a fascination about the natural world. I think, what Christiane talked about is, when you think about people that could come into this space, having a business development background that I had, or a geology background that I had, I was very, very fortunate to have that. Now I'm kind of sat in a space where I have to know my subject matter. I need to get after it. You can't run a business and not educate yourself about the materials that you're working with. You have to reach out to university. You have to kind of talk to Grown in Britain people like yourself. You have to go and talk to property developers or understand what are the glulam standards. You can't just buy a sawmill and start cutting timber. I think that's a hiding to nothing. I mean, you can take the bold step and get going with a small secondhand wood miser and learn that way and build it up, which I think is probably the small steps. But don't spend a long time doing that. Get yourself up to a place where you're knowledgeable, you're educated, you recognize there is an opportunity to do some good and have great fun at it. Coming to work needs to be about being passionate, but also recognize there's life outside there as well. Got to go home. There's a partner and family and kids and cool adventures to do and stuff. So I think, yeah. Anyway.
And I know there are organisations in Scotland that hold a lot of that knowledge, aren't there, like Scottish Woods, that you can tap into if you really want to understand about the materials that you're using as a construction business. Another question here: do you see a demand for homegrown timber, and is it growing in your experience?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think there's definitely a greater acceptance amongst consumers of imported materials, because the issue that many of these companies facing is that they've looked at their net zero plans. They're being asked by specifiers, they're being asked by their local council, they're being asked by whoever it is that wants the materials and products that they're selling, where's your net zero plan? And they present their net zero plan. They go, yeah, scope 1, done that. I've got rid of my diesel forklift. Scope 2, okay, now swap my electricity over to a green provider. Scope 3, really struggling with that. The reason they're struggling around Scope 3, as everyone knows, is that those are the emissions that you're inheriting from the materials and the like that you're purchasing. And I recognize it is complicated around transport. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but they're more inclined to say, well, what other options have we got around local materials? They also recognize that there's a social and corporate benefit to be doing that. I forget the terminology, the GS, the bit where the company needs to look at how is it providing social value in what it does. And if it can say, look, to its customers about to purchase its new home, this material came from a local sawmill that provides 10 rural based. It has a wider sort of influence. There's that trickle down effect, I think, which more companies, certainly the companies that want to make a difference, are thinking about. So I think that's probably the demand is more of a pull from those consumers of that material to at least give it a go, have that conversation. We're working with a local timber supplier. They're not ready to swap out all of their C16 material, but they're taking a timber batten that separates the plasterboard from the internal wall. That's a little start. And they want, for us, 20 kilometers a month, which is a big number. So there are some quick wins. It starts to, you turn the handle with that company. Hey, great, these are really cool guys to work with. That timber's actually really good. It's all structurally graded. And they question then, why do we spend the extra process to get that treated? They have to explain to their customer, that this building is now off-gassing all of this copper-based or whatever it is, timber treatment. Or they say, actually, we specify this differently, and actually this is homegrown material that doesn't have a negative impact.
And I think I'm just coming back with a couple of questions just dropped in. I know one of the things that you've invested in at Highland Heritage is timber grading, and the acoustic piece of equipment that you've got there. So Gail Fraser has asked if you have any suggestions, read the education of structural qualities of timber, so important and lacking for builders, architects and engineers. And I know you've addressed some of that. So
so we have invested in structural grading equipment. It's kind of expensive, but it's also accessible. If you're prepared to go down of course we can structurally grade visually, as lots of people know that. That gets you to a certain sort of timber size, but it's quite a slow process. There's a company that does sort of handheld structural graders. Or you can go the other end, and that's what the big mills do. They invest, £250,000 in automated processes. But, knowing that when you can turn around to your timber frame customer and say, yes, absolutely, we can grade C16 to C24, whatever it is, it's not without its shortcomings. and all of the work that Dan Ridley Ellis and the team have done at Napier has tried to create, those algorithms that allow you to grade materials in quantity. I think with all of this stuff is you need to be knowing what you're going to do with stuff that doesn't meet the grade. And I think that's a real trick and a real kind of a bit of a holdback is that, in order to grade that material, you actually have to have sized it pretty much to its final section size. Okay, it doesn't meet the grade. What are you going to do? And I think that's perhaps a bit of it's been an education for us. You don't know what kind of proportions of yield that you're going to get, but then you push the problem upstream because you specify, timber that's likely to yield better quality material. So, and I think it's just having options in your portfolio of where that material is going to go. But yeah, certainly structural grading is something that not many people have access to, and it is a bit more accessible. I'd be more than happy if people want to reach out as to what we've done with our own journey, and kind of connect you with the people that supply that material. But definitely a value add addition to us and allows us to differentiate ourselves somewhat as a small outfit.
Thank you very much, Guy.